Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another one of my Outlander videos and my review of episode 9 of season 3. So the events of this week's episode started not too long after the events that transpired as of the end of last week's episode. The new episode though jumped right into sorting out the problem at hand and working out a solution. Before I get into the details here though, there was something that I've avoided stating on last week's review. That was basically to avoid getting into arguments with some commenters over the fact that I've got my own taste and opinion of various episodes. But thankfully, some of your comments to said review did reflect that a lot of you share a similar opinion, so I'm just gonna come out and say it. I do understand that some of you still think the reunion part of the book and of the series are the best and most romantic thing ever. But I've been always a believer that the best romance is in the struggle. Call it an occupational hazard, but it is basically like looking at and evaluating a business organization. You pretty much get to know its hardest workers and best employees when the company or entity is going through its worst and they still manage to shine and do a great job. Now you might think this is a darker, grimmer look at things, but it is what it is. The concept of through thick and thin, and the concept of unconditional love. But that being said, I'm gonna be trying to do this review differently, more serialized and more bulleted in a point-by-point manner, rather than this one whole block of speech on my end. So if you've been following my reviews for a while now, let me know what you think of this new structure. Let's get down though to breaking down the events of this episode. Number 1. Jamie and Claire are heading to Jamaica. I know a lot of fans based on past comments on my Outlander videos are looking forward to this part of the novels, so this is kind of exciting. You all know what that implies as well, or shall I say whose appearance on the show that implies. Let's just say that we're getting closer than ever to realizing who the old bones that Joe Abernathy shared with Claire belong to. Not gonna spoil that here though, in case you haven't read the novels. Instead, I'm gonna move on to number 2. We've got Jamie blaming himself for the abduction of young Ian, feeling he's being punished for wanting to be happy and for annulling his marriage to Leary. Now that is kind of our typical male behavior right there. We like to blame ourselves for everything. It is basically built into our nature. Some of us have it built in because they like throwing themselves pity parties or because they want to be sympathized with, and some out of the mere fact that it is coded in their DNA. But besides that part, which was very realistic and very responsible of Jamie, he does do the smart thing there. He goes to reassure Claire that he meant every word, that he believes they belong together. Yet, he gives her the choice, letting her know that if she felt she didn't belong, that if she did not want to stay with him anymore, he would take her to the stones himself and let go of her. Number 3 though. Now I tend to be forgetful of things I've read and in some cases watched, but the show has this way of bringing about certain memory triggers. So pretty much the moment Fergus is mentioned for the first time on this episode, and before he even makes any appearances, it all came back to me. So basically at that point I remembered we would end up seeing Marcelly again this season, only now she would be Mrs. Fergus. Now I like the character of Marcelly there. Regardless of her attacks on Claire, I still liked her. When you think about it, she's kind of a lot like Claire. She's extremely stubborn, won't take people ordering her around or trying to force her into something she does not want to do, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. And Lauren Lyle, the actress portraying the role, happened to have portrayed the character extremely well. But over the course of that particular sequence with Marcelly, the surprised reaction both her and Claire gave Jamie when he stated they'll be staying in the same cabin was extremely hilarious. Seriously there, I really loved that light funny tone to both that moment and the conversation that followed between Claire and Jamie about protecting virtues. As a matter of fact, the whole dynamic that follows between Marcelly and Claire is actually pretty funny. Number 4 though. The conversation between Claire and Jamie about the clothes that he held onto, the sentimental value they held to Jamie, that was a pretty good scene. Once more, there were a lot of complaints about Jamie's reaction since Claire came back, with him not crying us a river about this or about that. But the heart of the matter is, there are these little things. Well, more like things that seem so little, but are actually huge. Things that actually reflect what kind of emotion this man holds within. And before you decide to start writing your own novel in the comments about this, I'm not really saying that crying is not manly, or not okay, or not good. But all I'm trying to say here is, different people react to the same situations in different manners, even if they hold the same emotional value to all of them. So you could not just quantify emotions by the amount of tears cried at a certain instant. Now I personally like the kind of emotional build-up there, even if it kind of deviates from the books. And I do believe a lot of fans would feel the same way if they thought of the novels as guidance to this TV adaptation and not as the letter of the law in the making of the series. Number 5 though. Women are bad luck on ships. Redheads too. Now that was basically one or two superstitions that started off as a joke on this episode. The second one though, with the horseshoe, ended up being some sort of an issue for Claire and Jamie. I did kind of find it though a bit irritating of Claire to wonder if she was invisible on the ship. It did sound like she might end up turning it into a feminist issue in the 1700s. I mean, be realistic here. Choose your battles and the century you end up having those battles in. Claire, to be honest, has a problem with a couple of things. Understanding her place is one of them, and undermining the authority of others is the second one. I definitely understand how the show and the novels love to present her as this strong, smart, independent, and stubborn woman. Because hey, women are men are equals and all of that, which is extremely true by the way. However though, when you are someone who came back from the future, someone who knows that this plague of inequality is gonna persist for too long, it's kinda stupid to fight a losing battle. It isn't really a show of intelligence as well to not understand what you're up against and act accordingly. It isn't smart as well to challenge the captain of a ship and his superstitions even if you think both are ignorant. It just feels that sometimes Claire reacts and talks without thinking of either the situation she's in or the repercussions of her actions. I do understand that she came from a different time, that she sees things differently, but I also do understand that the situation dictates what it dictates. But just so we don't end up turning my comment into a feminist issue down below, I'm talking about the right kind of reaction that I expect from both genders and not one. I would personally not challenge the authority of this man on a ship, knowing he could make my life miserable. It is just all about picking your battles, and Claire seems to not know how to do that. This is simply evident because of number 6. Now what follows here is not really made clear on the episode, but you could kind of come to this conclusion. Claire's continuous challenging of the idea of the horseshoe based on the fact that she believes it is a silly superstition. Now that seems to have, logically speaking, fueled the suspicions of the crew of the ship towards her group. Now I'm not going to be lying here because I don't exactly remember the details from the book on this part. However though, I could see the crew of the ship wanting to throw the person who brought them bad luck overboard coming from that moment onwards. That is basically from the moment Claire decided to challenge the captain's authority early on and publicly. Number 7 though. While Claire does not seem to understand the concept and neither does Jamie, I do kind of get the captain's point, wanting to make sure his men feel he's doing all he could to protect them. He was actually totally right there. If the men were to start this mutiny he spoke of, things would definitely get out of control. He would no more have a voice, and the men would do whatever they liked. And all of that would leave the captain, Claire and Jamie, and those on their side extremely outnumbered. So it was basically all about the lesser of two evils, in the middle of an ocean where there is nowhere to run if you end up being that outnumbered. Number 8 though. You've got to love the character of Mr. Willoughby, providing a most welcome distraction as the ship's crew almost threw Jamie's man overboard. He finally opened up about his life in China, the life Claire wanted him to tell her about early on in the events of the episode. And it was kind of an emotional moment for Mr. Willoughby. It was also kind of funny with the reactions of the others. We had Marcelly sort of asking for translation, Claire and Jamie smiling, and everyone standing there pretty stunned, like they forgot what they were fighting over to start with. It was, all in all, truly touching though. His story did as well seem to address the concept of racism and how he has been viewed as inferior out of China. I did like that because the show needed to address that earlier with Joe Abernathy, and it did not seem to do so then. Unfortunately, and as I speak right now, this issue needs to be addressed. A lot of people worldwide at the moment are actually regressing back to racism. But all of that anyway brings us to number 9. Willoughby's story seemed to break the curse, but it wasn't really that. It was the fact that he knew the wind was back and that rain was coming. And all he needed to get people to realize all that was happening was to distract them from wanting to kill one another. So once again, it was a great sequence all in all. I'd even say it is one aspect of this episode that made it even better than all its predecessors this season. It does actually feel like the episodes of the season just keep getting better and better the further away we are from the premiere and the closer we are to the finale. Number 10 though. What is up with all the men admitting they are cowards? Alright, that is beside the point. The thing is, this admission of cowardice by Fergus, along with telling Jamie he was being a coward as well, not telling Claire about Leary, goes to build the bond between the two of them. It kinda goes to tell the audience how close Fergus and Jamie are. And they are clearly close enough for Fergus to understand Jamie, know what he's thinking, and be a lot like him. After all, he was raised by him. But finally, number 11. The Artemis and the Porpoise meet mid-ocean and Claire's oath from the 20th century comes back into play. But all of this also starts a sub-chapter of the arc leading up to Jamaica and getting young Ian back. And just like in the novel, Captain Leonard decides to act like a total shithead, departing from the Artemis and separating Claire and Jamie from one another once again. Now, even though this season dealt with a whole lot of years in Claire and Jamie's lives, the remaining 4 episodes of the season will be dealing with only 3, maybe 4 months of events. But it is gonna be extremely interesting. There are a lot of new characters that are gonna be introduced, but more importantly, there are gonna be old acquaintances that we'll be seeing, including John Gray and one other very exciting person that we probably all miss. But that's all on this episode for now. Now I wanted to say more, but I found myself under the restraint of not wanting to give away much of what is to come. But all in all, it was a pretty solid episode. I actually think it is even better than last week's, and last week's episode was actually my favorite. In my opinion, this episode had solid delivery in performance and storytelling from Claire, Mr. Willoughby, and Marcelly. Last week's episode, which I loved, had a lot of good performances, but was more Jenny-centric, which is a character I adore. However, a multiple character episode beats last week's almost one-man episode. Also, I do understand some of you might not like my criticism of a lead character like that of Claire's, but you shouldn't really think of it as criticism. Highlighting the shortcomings of Claire or Jamie or any other character on the show actually makes them more human, makes this more real. It does go to tell us that they have this entire love story going on for them while not being flawless, while being flawed human beings. But all of that being said, my work here is done, so let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode. Let me know as well how excited you are about meeting our good old friend with the 200-year-old dead bones. But please, and in all cases, make sure you start your comment with a spoiler alert if you're gonna discuss unexplored events from the novel. And remember to slap this video a much appreciated like if you liked its content. Now while you're doing that, you can always subscribe and enable notifications for my future videos. And until I see you next time, thank you all for watching and have a good one.